where the redwoods meet the sea.
The ocean.
The beauty of numerous tsunamis.
Welcome to History Del Norte, a production of KFUG Community Radio and the Del Norte County Historical Society.
Board of Supervisors meeting. I'm a member of the Democratic Central Committee.
That's Sharon McKinney, reading from her prepared statement.
My place in the community. I have a house, a yard, family, 3 dogs. I'm very busy.
And that's just since retiring?
Yes.
Oh my gosh.
It's my second career as a professional volunteer.
We're sitting in the upstairs Victorian parlor. Sharon, tall and graceful, perched on the upholstered lip of a divan, while I slump over the low arm of a chair built long ago for someone with much better posture. Sharon is reading a thumbnail paragraph outlining her life since her retirement from teaching some 29 years ago. It's quite a paragraph, beginning with a sense of loss and isolation post-retirement and building through the intervening years with a slew of volunteer work in the community, from tutoring English to writing newspaper columns to being an assembly member of the California Senior Legislature. Just last month, Sharon McKinney was recognized by the Del Norte County Historical Society as 2018's Volunteer of the Year. I've spoken with Sharon before, so I knew that any time spent conversing with this energetic, passionate person about, well, anything would be time well spent. Using her award as an excuse, I made a date with Sharon to meet in the upstairs parlor at the Society's museum on H Street one recent Saturday. It was a bright spring day, the kind of day that reminds you the rain will, indeed, eventually end. As the sun streamed jovially through the windows, Sharon and I stepped over the low divider into the heavily brocaded Victorian-era display and found our seats. To say Sharon McKinney is spry is to do her an injustice, with the term's implication that somehow this spryness exists despite the tally of one's years. With Sharon, and so with any who spend time in her company, the tally of her years is never a factor. It's just a number, and seems to have no bearing on Sharon's outlook, energy, or activity. When I ask, she tells me she's 84. When I tell her that amazes me, she simply asks, why? And then follows Sharon McKinney's recipe for aging correctly.
First, you have to be curious. Curiosity gets me out of bed every morning. What's it going to be like? Starts with the weather. I've always been a weather person. My next life, I'm going to be a meteorologist. So I look out the window, and then, of course, I have to deal with dogs. You have to have something to take care of besides yourself and orchids. They don't need much. So then I start thinking about my day. I get to go someplace today. And I like to be obligated. Like my time to fill. I don't like to be home very many days in a row. It's too easy. And I can understand why some people sit all the time, because it's easy. Sometimes getting dressed up and going out to do something for other people isn't as easy as it sounds. I'm politically active. I attend church regularly. I have a family. I have a house, yard, garden. I grow vegetables. And I walk a lot. Mm-hmm. I do my stretches, do my physical therapy exercises, read, listen to music, watch TV.
So it's mind and body and everything, right?
It's being stimulated. I could not believe how excited I was when Steph Wenning asked me if I'd teach the creative writing class for the Arts for Veterans. I went, wow, yeah, I can do that. And then I thought, wait a minute, what did you just say? You've never taught short story. So I had to stay ahead of them every time. And it was, my synapses were so happy.
Yeah, yeah.
And I think that's an important part of aging also, is keeping your brain going.
Yeah.
You have to feed it well. You have to exercise it.
Oh, wow. Now, are you a native Del Norte?
No, I came in '67.
Okay.
I married a man who was a teacher here and got a contract in the mail sight unseen. Came up here and interviewed them because they didn't interview me. Yeah. Now you kind of know who I am, don't you?
So, what'd you think? What'd you think of Del Norte, of Crescent City, the first time you saw it then?
It was great for the kids. I had 3 half-grown kids, and it was a great place for them. And I've always enjoyed living here. I'm a walker. I walk all the time. My goal is 5 miles a day. I don't always make it, but that's what goals are for. And I do get my little Fitbit, helps me with a little motivation. Yesterday was hard to get out, but I managed between rainstorms twice.
Yeah, good. That's the tricky
But
part.
I started coming here in 2004, and
To the
the
society?
museum,
Yeah.
and I've always loved the stories. And every time I come here, I learn something new. I see something I didn't notice before. I hear a story I didn't hear before, or we go get an old newspaper out of the resource room, or go pick out a folder. There's so much here. And it was really brought home to me how important it is when I was teaching the creative writing class for the Arts for Veterans program through Danaka. Here were my 8 veterans, all residents. None of them had been here.
Wow.
So one of the days, I brought them here to teach them about research. I said, bring your notebooks, and I want you to wander around meaningfully. Look at everything and make notes about things that you want to know more about. And Karen gave them a wonderful lecture on this and that, you know, especially that. And then I turned them loose in the research room. Every one of them had picked a subject that had brought up something from wandering around in here. And they all had to add that to their short story. And it was so much fun.
That's a great idea, actually. That's a great sort of focused group endeavor like that.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
4 of them joined the Historical Society. And one of them offered to volunteer. So, but what they liked was the stories. They hear more stories. They would have sat all day. And it reminded me of something that I said when I was here with you with the beachfront park thing, when I said you cannot own living in a place until you know the stories. And it was so important to these 8 people. More, tell us more. And I'd mentioned something, is there a story about that? You know, and Karen was so helpful too. And people need to come here. They need to know our history. They need to, we would like to write a column for the triplicate again, because it might help the triplicate, but it would certainly help with the storytelling.
Yeah.
Because unless they come here, who's going to tell them? So anyway, that's my story.
That's your story. What drew you to come volunteer here? Out of all the opportunities you had in retirement to volunteer and to do things, what drew you to the Historical Society?
RSVP used to be a meaningful resource. It's been defunded so many times that I think all they do anymore is the senior center.
Okay.
But at that time they had MOUs with practically every nonprofit in town.
What's RSVP?
It's Retired and Senior Volunteer Program.
Okay.
It's managed through the Area 1 Agency on Aging in Eureka.
Okay, okay.
And it was a big deal. They had a full-time person here, and they, you know, everybody got a little stipend for mileage, and I think they offered some kind of insurance. But it's nothing now.
Oh, wow.
But one of the things that was offered was the museum. So I came and interviewed them, because that's my style, and said, I think I want to do this. And I've had wonderful partners. Rick Bennett and I were partners for many years, and he's such an interesting man. We had a wonderful time together when we weren't serving as docents here. And now my current partner is Max Blair, who's another one who's always wanting to learn something. He'll go get an old map, he'll go get an old book out, something. So there's this play between the people, and there's the play with the visitors that makes it fun. I love travel stories, and I like to talk to them. Where have you been? Where are you going? You know, what's the funnest thing you've done? What do you... And I really like the people who go from town to town visiting the museums more than the people that go from town to town visiting the casinos. And a lot of them will say, amazing, this place is amazing.
That's a great vacation idea, is to
Yeah.
go and travel between historical societies
Yeah.
and museums.
Yeah.
It's an interesting way to get to know a whole region that way.
And people, that's what they do.
Oh, wow.
And they spend time, and some of them come back because they didn't see it all. In fact, one of my veteran people said, I have to come back, I'm stuffed so full. I need to come another day. I can't look at another thing, and yet there's more to look at. So and that's the beauty of this place, is it's just amazingly busy.
We've talked, like when I talked with Karen for the first podcast, that was one thing we talked about. So I remember when there was basically, what I said was like a table with a bunch of rusty things on it up here on the third floor, and that's it. And then look at this place now. It's amazing. I mean, we're sitting in what, this kind of mock-up recreation of a parlor. A Victorian age parlor, it looks like, right?
Complete with uniforms. Mm-hmm. I love the clothes. I'm sure they never were very clean.
Yeah.
I worry about things like that.
So the stories that you've come across in your research,
yes.
Because as well, I mean, sort of, is there anything here that you haven't done? You've been a docent, you've been a researcher. In essence, you've been involved in publicity because you've been writing columns and things. Of all the, what stories stick out? What things have you learned about Del Norte County that jump out at you?
Wow. I think that history with the natives.
The whole tragic history?
Yes.
All the way,
I got in trouble with one of our editors because he told me I couldn't write anything controversial. And I said, history is controversial. He actually took a couple of my columns out because they were things he didn't want people to be stirred up about.
What sorts of things?
One of them was about the taking over the Indian properties and pushing people out.
Which is a matter of historical record, but...
Well, and I tried to talk to him about the fact that he didn't like anything I wrote about the changes when the park came, because it's still controversial.
Oh, just about the loss of the resource economy and
right.
Yeah.
Anyway, he said, people are still angry, and you'll angry them up. And I said, well, all of this came off the front page of the triplicate. Come on, it's not like I dug up any secrets.
It's what's your take on that? That's kind of a thing that I'm interested in is the tragic history of white and Native American interaction on the North Coast and how it colors. I don't think most people realize that it does, but how it colors. It
still does.
Yeah.
It still does. Well, my opinion of watching the history, what they did with the Chinese people, for instance, invited them here to do work, and then when they were through with it working, they threw them away. And the people who came and settled here were exploiters, and they came to use stuff.
Good point.
And then when they were through using it, they tossed it or killed it or ate it or did something else. And I think that mentality, unfortunately, still lingers in some of the good old boy behaviors.
Interesting. So that there's the mentality, kind of the culture of exploitation that was the birth of Del Norte County.
It
lingers to this day.
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, if you just go across the border to Brookings, where they didn't have that, there's no harbor there. They didn't come there to do anything useful. There's your arts. There's your band shell. There's your big library that was funded by the citizens. There were all of those things we don't have.
Wow. Okay, so that's a whole... The difference in how we perceive ourselves compared to how we perceive Brookings has always interested me as well. We've always been kind of, hangdog, downtrodden. And again, I thought it was
unable to plan ahead is what we've got. I mean, if you want a condo, where do you go?
I don't know. Where do
Brookings.
You go? Okay. I just wouldn't want a condo. But no. And I know nothing about the founding of Brookings. How long has Brookings been there? Not a clue.
I don't know either. I just know it's different.
It's a different culture. Yeah.
It's completely different.
Wow. And I had always put like kind of our hangdog sort of experience as being born of the tsunami, born of basically being, downtown.
It's historical.
It is. It goes back before then, which is what I found with the first round of tapes that I digitized, listening to what they were talking about in 1964, right after the tsunami, when they're talking about rebuilding downtown. And a lot of the same issues that we have today were there. Downtown was drying up. And now you've got me thinking about, well, then, is our whole mentality, our whole sort of self-applied worldview, that goes all the way back to our founding and just the people who came here initially and the mindset they brought with them.
That's right. In my opinion, just from observing and reading and knowing stories, it sounds to me like that was exactly why they came, what they did, and what's still hanging around. We need some young women on the planning commissions here because things are not moving the way they could.
Okay, this is interesting. Let's talk about the future then, since we've talked a whole bunch about history and we're in the Historical Society Museum. Yeah, that's an interesting take. So young women, what sort of energy, what sort of change do you think young women on because you're right, the Planning Commission is where things happen.
Yes.
So you want some young women sitting on the Planning
I
Commission.
do.
Why?
They won't bring with them the history, especially the millennials. They don't care about the history. They want to do something now and something into the future. I see a lot of progress from our young people that take away the stagnation.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
It's interesting that you say that they don't care about the future. So many people, or don't care about the past. So many people denigrate millennials for that very thing.
I know, but it's
that's
important.
A strength.
I mean, they're a new wave,
Mm-hmm.
and they're going to wash away a whole lot of stuff that's been hanging around that's unnecessary anymore. But the other travel stories that I really enjoy are the visitors at the Cultural Center, at the Chamber of Commerce,
The folks who stop
where
in there.
I also volunteer, of course.
All right, before we get into that, how you like that, how many hours a week right now do you spend volunteering?
Oh, just 3.
Just 3?
Well, I'm not here yet until visitors
Till it
season
opens again
starts in
okay.
May.
Okay.
And I will be at the visitor center downtown more often when they start getting busy.
Mm-hmm.
On the Tuesdays that I don't go to Board of Supervisors meetings, I will be there also with the visitors that come there. I'm not interested in the Redwood National Park Visitor Center. I'm not all that interested in hiking and camping. I'm much more interested in learning about our businesses and our community here.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why I've chosen that particular volunteer job. Like the people I work with. Most of my dearest friends that I've kept from day one of my volunteering, I've learned from volunteering.
Oh, that you've made friendships with them just from
Yes,
yeah. Mm-hmm.
because you work with somebody very long, and you're going to know something about them.
Yeah, good or bad, you have to have a relationship
You
with
do.
them. Yeah.
And I haven't had any bad ones. And especially when I was in the police patrol, you'll be in the car with somebody for 3 hours. You better like them.
Yeah. So your feel for I've been talking to Sarah Carone a lot lately.
yeah.
She's been on the radio a lot
Oh,
with
Sarah's
me. and
great.
Sarah's a wonderful woman.
Yes,
So
she
much
is.
energy and passion for what she
Yes,
does.
she does.
What's your take on the feel in Crescent City? It seems like, to me, compared to the past few decades, couple of decades that I know, that things are kind of looking up.
Did she show you a document called Crescent City 2020?
She's told me about it, but I haven't seen
I
it.
have one.
Mm-hmm.
It was written in 1994.
Mm-hmm.
And I read through it, and they were amazingly optimistic.
Oh, really? What was supposed to have happened by 2020?
Well, 60,000 people in the county. Guess what? They
we
missed
fell.
by about 40,000.
Yeah, we fell a little shy of that goal.
But they had great goals,
Mm-hmm.
and they thought they were doable, and very little of it. The water sewage treatment plant
Mm-hmm.
was a good one, but most of it is still hanging out there waiting. But you could go through that document and find some interesting questions to ask certain people.
Oh, wow, really?
Yes,
really.
you could.
I want to say one of the next times that Sarah's going to be on, we're going to specifically discuss that document.
I
And
would
it's-
like, yeah, I'd
That's
like you to do that.
Wow, wow.
Because those people came from all over the business community, and they were, they had this as a statement, what do you call it, a mission statement about what they thought as a group. And I liked that they said they didn't always agree, but they had a consensus, and that's so important to have a consensus. We don't all move forward unless we can agree on something.
And it seems like that's gotten harder and harder,
Harder to
attain.
do, yeah.
Wow. Sharon,
good.
that's beautiful. Can I keep that piece of paper?
Sure.
Thank you. Thank you. So when they open up here and they open for their summer, their visitors' hours, will you be a docent here? What
Yes.
else will you be doing?
Well, I'll be here
Do you still do research? Do you still look things
whenever
up?
I can, you know. And if anybody wants to ask a question, I love to dig around and find answers. That's what was fun about writing the column, was I started with A, and I just went through and pulled out a file. Have you looked at those files down there?
I know of them. I haven't looked in any detail.
You would have a ball because
they're by topic, they're by subject as well.
Yeah.
When we were doing the Beachfront Park
Right.
project, you just pulled one of those out and came and put it down.
I
right?
did. I also gave you a list of my columns that I'd written. But those kids were great. You
Yeah.
did a fine job
Oh, well, thank
mentoring them and getting them moved on. Did you do that again last summer?
Yep, last summer, and we're gearing up again.
At about this point, I became aware that Sharon was indeed interviewing me as I told her about my work with local youth and with inmates at Pelican Bay. From there, we devolved into discussing tourists and the precarious state of our inlet highways, and then...
That's enough, isn't it?
That is enough, yes, thank you.
And then
very
we
much.
were done. Sharon was off to whatever was to come for her next on a spring Saturday, while I hunted up Karen Betlieski, director of the Historical Society, in the documents room beneath the stairs. Karen was busy returning some binders and large-bound volumes that had been left on the table. We got to talking about the cassette tapes I've been converting to digital files for the Society.
Yeah, a lot more interesting than redevelopment.
The first batch were of a 4-hour redevelopment agency meeting from late 1964 that had been broadcast on a local radio station, KPLY, which sounds boring, and it was.
I know, really, it's like yawn.
But at the same time, it totally wasn't. Because it was at this meeting, which was broadcast to the entire community live, that the redevelopment agency, made up of the city council at this point in time, shared with the public its master plan for rebuilding Crescent City after the March tsunami.
Primary goal is the immediate rebuilding and redevelopment of our presently ruined city. And one of the purposes of this hearing is to explain the means by which we believe this can be accomplished with your cooperation.
So much of our present city, its physical makeup, its organization, and to a certain extent, its very outlook on itself and the world adjacent, was laid out during this boring 4-hour meeting. And the fact that the federal funds the city utilized for rebuilding came from the urban renewal programs begun by Washington in the 1940s only served to tie our little town to the larger currents of American social history in the 20th century. But what struck me most about the recordings was the point I'd brought up with Sharon McKinney. Time and again during the agency's meeting, the redevelopment plan was laid out as addressing the woes downtown Crescent City had been experiencing before the tsunami. Empty storefronts, declining business investment and utilization as shoppers were being drawn to larger markets elsewhere. The very problems downtown has experienced for most of my life. I'd grown up with this understanding that the tsunami had marked a sort of break in our local history. Like, before the waves, Crescent City had been a vibrant fishing and logging town with a bustling downtown full of diners and taverns and hardware stores. We've all seen the photographs of bulbous old cars parked at jaunty angles along 2nd Street with the distant smoking hulk of the Hobbs Wall Mill hunkering over the vanishing point. But what these recordings make clear is that much of the stagnation and economic backwardness that has plagued Crescent City in more recent decades didn't start with the tsunami or the ham-fisted attempt to rebuild our ruined town.
A foot mall? Really?
But rather, as history usually teaches, the reasons behind all this are more subtle and nuanced. As I exchanged these cassettes for the next batch in the documents room with Karen, my attention was captured by a large, boxy appliance, an historical artifact of sorts that made me smile.
Oh, see, it is a historical society. What is this, like a Selectric typewriter down here?
Huh?
What's that? Is that an actual workstation?
This is a typewriter.
Yeah, it's great.
And actually, we use it to do our
Cards. Yeah.
our Rolodex for the Book of Memories.
What's the Book of Memories?
Actually, the Book of Memories it was set up as a way to memorialize someone here at the Historical Society. So we have a bunch of books down there.
Mm-hmm.
See, all those books contain obituaries of people that were special in other people's lives, and the Book of Memories, actually, you pay to put your loved one in the Book of Memories. All the money actually goes to the maintenance of the museum.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, so
How
it
long
was
has
set
that
up. Well, I don't know when it was set up, but we have obituaries going all the way back into the 60s.
And so these hardbound things, these older things, or the binders?
The binders down at the bottom.
Okay.
You can see there's the 2010, and it goes back. And there's one there that goes to the 60s, but it could be that they did those retroactively once they set it up. But I'm not so sure, because I do believe that Frances Turner Macbeth set it up. It was her idea to set it up, and of course she's been gone for quite a long time.
Wow.
So it could be that they really did start back in the 60s to, well, they didn't have this museum until, at least 65. So
So what's the purpose? Is it to raise money, and then
yes,
what
it's also to raise money, and let's see. And see, then the person's obituary is in a book, and it tells who donated to in their name.
I'll be.
See?
So are these ever on display? Are these ever out for the public to see?
No, but the public can come any time and look at them.
That's really interesting.
Yeah.
Huh.
And it was a way to help with the upkeep of the museum. But it was also a way that a person, like, we still have a lady that donates money every year to her mom, who's been gone since 97.
Oh, wow.
And she donates money every single year in her mom's name.
Oh, man.
Yeah.
That's sweet.
Cool.
Before I left, I asked Karen why the Society had chosen Sharon McKinney as its Volunteer of the Year.
Sharon is, like I said, she's very dedicated. She's very reliable. She's always on the lookout for other potential volunteers. She's very community-oriented. She doesn't just volunteer here, but she volunteers at a lot of places. And she was really deserving.
To say the least. And it's my sincere hope that we, as a community, can continue to be deserving of the interest and involvement of people like Sharon McKinney. You've been listening to History Del Norte, a production of the Del Norte County Historical Society and KFUG Community Radio. Thanks, as always, to Karen Betlieski of the Society, and a special thanks to Sharon McKinney, the Historical Society's Volunteer of the Year for 2018. For KFUG Community Radio, I'm Paul Kritz. Thanks for listening.